go. 2023 is a wrap, and what a year in gaming it was. Not necessarily for the industry in some cases, looking at all those layoffs, but as a person who enjoys video games, you had a great year. There was both great and awful. Awful, it was probably one of the worst year overall for PC ports, but we did also get some really good games as well. Personally, it's probably one of the better years I've been able to enjoy, as I had money to actually enjoy it. So that's a thing. Now, I play a lot of games, so to keep this list manageable, I'm going to go with my top game of each month of the year. So 12. However, there will be a month here or there skipped, as nothing just piqued my interest or it wasn't worthy of an extra title from a previous month. Overall, I do have 14 games total, and yes, that's more than 12, but I feel like there were at least 14 games that deserved recognition on this list for coming out last year. So, with some months needing that doubling down, and a month here or there that just got skipped outright, and with this introduction out of the way, let's go ahead and head back to January of last year, a year ago, and get going on my top games of 2023. Starting off with January, which is typically a light month for gaming following the holiday season. Everybody's still in their Christmas coma and their New Year drunkenness. We did get a Shadow Drop release from Tango Gameworks. You know, the people behind the acclaimed horror series, The Evil Within. Hi-Fi Rush came out of literally nowhere, and it blended a third-person RPG hack-and-slash title with the musical genre in just this fantastically vibrant world. Memorable characters everywhere, great voice acting, licensed and original music that played throughout the game. On top of this, we got numerous creative boss battles, memorable one-liners, and overall just a great script to rhythmically bash the opposition in a musical dystopian world. I feel like with actual marketing, Hi-Fi Rush would have done amazing. Instead, while it might have been a critical success, it wasn't necessarily a monetary success. Now, don't let the idea of a rhythm game driving you off. It's not actually entirely required. You can just play off beat and whatnot, but with correct timing and inputs, everything is just much more satisfying to complete. Though January was an extremely light month of releases, Hi-Fi Rush absolutely earns a place on this list, even if it probably came in another month with more releases. It's that great of a title. Moving on to February, we're just catching up to speed here. Here's the first month that has 2 games, so pretty early in the list. Starting off, we have Hogwarts Legacy. Ignoring the controversy around the Wizarding World's creator, developers Portkey Games and Avalanche Software did a lot of work to separate themselves and their art from its creator, and we were all the beneficiaries of this. This is the best gaming experience we've ever had in the titular Harry Potter universe, though that bar is also extremely low. Don't let that fool you. Prior games in the universe have ranged from bad to atrocious, but it's not that it was just a low bar that it walked over. It was actually a fun game and a great experience. It flew over the bar. Completely decoupled from Harry Potter outside of a few odds and ends here that you would catch, I guess, in the lore of the books and the movies. It's completely decoupled from it outside of it being at Hogwarts with some, Easter eggs. You take on the role of a special transfer student into Hogwarts, capable of seeing and using a special ancient magic that was lost to time, except for a secret organization. Of course, magic is split into 3 types, mixing and matching to break enemy shields to get damage through, dodging and parrying spells, not to mention the forbidden curses. Puzzles across the Hogwarts grounds and surrounding countryside and in the castle. Combat with dark wizards, combat with creatures, goblins, whatever. It's all here except for Quidditch, sadly. Somehow the highest selling game of 2023 worldwide didn't get a single nod to any Game of the Year conversation. It did have its issues here or there, but every game does. Not any game is perfect. I think it was snuffed purposefully to avoid any potential drama from that special and obnoxiously loud X crowd, but it is what it is. Porky Games and Avalanche Software can safely sleep knowing that they created the best-selling game and probably one of the best-received games of 2023. Now, we also can't talk about February without also talking about the amazing love letter to the BioShock series that we got in Atomic Heart. Launching at the end of February, which thankfully gave me 3 weeks with prior title of the month, Atomic Heart was a combination of ideas and themes that ended up working extremely well together. In my review, I did state how the open world I thought was the weakest part, and I stand by that, with the infinitely spawning enemies, which did cut down on my desire to explore the islands, but every other aspect of the game, even the horny shopkeeper, were great. The aesthetic design, nuclear punk, and with a clear callback to the first time you see Rapture and BioShock at a later point, some horror motifs here or there, dark comedy, it's all here. Outside of the open world, you do have fantastically designed set pieces in the more linear elements and portions of the games, and these all do vary in themes and designs. I know some people didn't like jumping off from one design space to another, but I honestly enjoyed it. The varying designs of enemies and set pieces kept it fresh and intriguing to me. Weapons that were realistic yet fit within the world were present and helped keep the wild setting of Atomic Heart grounded, while then you did have your mutants and automatons and robots and androids roaming around as fodder. The cast of characters you encounter is diverse as well and all over the place, from the enigmatic elderly granny to the haughty scientist Dmitry Sechenov to the endlessly horny vendor bot Nora. They were all well written and helped keep a light-hearted sense to the world. I do think one thing that Munfish, the developer behind Atomic Heart, doesn't get enough credit for is that the PC port of the game was absolutely phenomenal. It looked great. It ran great. Bugs were minimal. They were few and far between. And this was back when I was running on an i7 9700K and a 2070 Super. And the game ran fantastic, which does remind me that I should revisit the title with my 13900K and a 4090 to see how it runs in 4K maxed out. Fans of BioShock and those sort of games, you'd be remiss not to check out Atomic Heart if you have not already. It is an absolute love letter to that series, and it goes above and beyond it in its own ways as well. Moving on to March, we are back to one title, and I spent time hopping back into Hogwarts Legacy and Atomic Heart, and a few other titles. But there was one major release here in March that intrigued me, and that being Wulong Fallen Dynasty, which came to us from Team Ninja. Wulong was like a Sekiro Light. I know a lot of people didn't like it, which was honestly crazy to me because it was just a more accessible Sekiro. But I thought it was great and a fun title. Souls-likes are one of my favorite types of titles, and Wulong was a more relaxing take on it, blending historical Chinese military conflicts and mythology while telling a fictionalized tale of the fall of the Han Dynasty. It doesn't take long going from fighting enemy foot soldiers to fighting terror-inducing mythological beasts. Interesting systems where each enemy you kill will make you temporarily stronger in an area, whereas falling to an enemy will transfer that strength to a potentially random mob. Diverse weapon sets, special skills, magic, and beautiful and varying environments all make Wulong a great title to play through. Now, Wulong didn't launch without its issues. Like many titles have this year, 2023 was a year of lazy PC ports. Stuttering and slowdowns were present at different moments in the title, sometimes happening in boss fights. What made this more infuriating was that only the player character would suffer. You would literally slow down to a snail's pace while enemies and the environment around you would continue moving at a normal pace. This was a Koei Tecmo issue, as happened with Wild Hearts later in the year. That title also suffered on PC. Something about the shared engine potentially between Wulong and Wild Hearts caused the issues on PC. Fortunately, the game was still fun and interesting enough to outweigh the issues, and it was the first good Souls-like we got in the year. Moving into April, I got a surprise game from Shira Games that I enjoyed called War Tales. While it had been in access since early 2021, April 2023 actually introduced me to the title with its full release, and a great time it was. War Tales is an interesting title and one of a few smaller titles on my list for the year. It is a low fantasy tactics RPG. You take command of a group of mercenaries who you build out with classes and some slight visual aesthetic choices in a low fantasy medieval setting. Low fantasy meaning that it does have ghosts, apparitions, the undead, and a few more paranormal things here over, say, having elves and magic. You explore the lands by moving your party, while combat encounters are entirely played out as a tactics game, with your party's members moving spaces based on movement speed, attacking and using skills with their action points, different classes for the characters, recruiting new members to your mercenary troop, creating trade caravans, training animals to be pack mules or attack mules. Came up with that one on the fly. There are even some light survival elements, such as managing your food consumption for your party or alcohol for various things, especially if you have an alcoholic, meat specifically if you have someone who has the plague, ancient catacombs to delve into, conspiracies to uncover, rebellions to aid or crush, and archaeology to participate in. It's a smaller title compared to all but another one on this list, but one I sank some of the most time into, and I mean that could be due because it was a slower combat, but I stand by enjoying the title. It had a great replayability as well, letting you roam around and do what you want in whatever order you want, where enemies scale with you, or a curated order where the enemies have their difficulty based upon their region and where the developers want you to go, where you're playing through a story in a specific order. No way is correct. I did play both modes, and both modes were great. Fans of tactics styles RPGs, pick this up. You won't regret it. It's a simple yet surprisingly deep, and combat will keep you on the edge as your party is pushed to its limit, and finally being able to camp at the end of a long, rough, arduous day, only to be ambushed in the middle of the night by ghost wolves. June marked the return of Diablo. After years of teasing, Blizzard did it. You did not need a phone for this title. They finally released it, and I still play it with my wife a few times each week with each season comes out, completing those seasons as well. It's definitely her favorite game right now. She does enjoy a good ARPG. Me, I just like ARPGs, and Diablo IV is an accessible and a great entry in the genre that seems to be designed for live service and is doing it fairly well. Bringing back numerous fan-favorite classes and combinations of other ones, with new expansions planned in a new season every 3 months, there will be plenty of content for it as the years go on. Now, it's not perfect by no means. I do believe a lack of WASD movement for me is killer, and it does work great with a controller, however, and as far as ARPGs go, it's now the standard for graphical fidelity at this point. My one complaint, but I know is the title's only 7 months old, is that the content is a bit light. But as far as ARPGs go, when it launched, it did include a full 40+ hour campaign and a functioning endgame system that was a great base for everything to start on. Now, then there's the player base who will compare it to various other ARPGs who have been out for years or even a decade at this point with different content and systems, but come on guys, chill, let them cook, let Blizzard get stuff rolling for it. Each new season is providing more content that helps people stick around longer while providing new builds and items as well as great quality of life updates. I come back to it extensively every season until I'm through the season journey fully, flush out a build, and it helps me scratch that loot-based game itch. Plus, it is probably the best co-op title released in 2023, and probably a game I'm going to be playing for years and years and years down the road. Oh, are you still here? Well, thank you for sticking around for this long. We're about halfway through the list currently. With that in mind, I would like to ask you to do me a favor. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I appreciate it, and go ahead and give the video a like if you enjoy the content. This way I can kind of gauge what people are enjoying. But, I mean, I'm not going to listen anyways. I'm just going to do what I want. So with that out of the way, let's return to the list of my top games from 2023. We also can't talk about June without the indie, but not really an indie title, but it's kind of an indie title, Dave the Diver. Dave the Diver had been in early access for 2 years-ish up to this point, but it wasn't a full release yet, and much like War Tales, I hadn't played it until it fully released. And what a game that launched as well. Made by Mint Rocket, a smaller studio within Korean giant developer Nexon. Kind of a weird thing. Dave the Diver was sorely lacking in that typical Nexon microtransaction hell. Anyways, Dave the Diver is a fantastically charming 2D side-scrolling fishing, sushi, restaurant managing, farming simulator with survival elements and some rhythm game moments, some stealth moments. It's really weird. It's a lot. Not to mention, it probably just has the best and some of the most memorable characters out of every game of 2023. So that's also really, really neat. On top of this, it has some of the most over-the-top and ridiculous cutscenes that you will ever see when you complete certain objectives. From a weeaboo otaku gunsmith and his J-pop idol to a samurai-esque sushi chef. You'll want to watch each cutscene at least once. Not to mention the gameplay loop of fishing to keep your restaurant afloat, with hiring and training employees, to exploring and discovering a once-thought lost underwater civilization while also combating a mercenary organization of poachers that is hiding behind a phony environmentalist group, to boss battles with massive sea creatures and underwater mechs. It's a weird title. And let's not forget the upcoming crossover with the other fishing indie darling, Dredge. Dave the Diver is on my shortlist for must-play games this year. I know I finished everything and maxed it out, but sometimes I do just like to go back and do some light-hearted fishing. It's just a fun, beautiful title, great sound design. Dave the Diver is just a blast that came out of literally nowhere. We are moving into the back half of 2023, and we are now in July, and we got Dino Crisis at Home. Now I feel like calling it Dino Crisis at Home is doing it some injustice, and I'm of course talking about Exoprimal from Capcom. It is a truly unique take on a hero shooter. When it was revealed, I honestly thought it was the most stupid premise for a game that I had ever seen. Dinosaur time storms that throw out various dinosaurs while you fight them in exosuits. Well, game hit a beta earlier in the year, and when I was waiting for the Diablo IV beta, I tried it. And man, I was right. It's the absolute most stupid premise for a game, but I also loved it. It might be immensely stupid, but it's immensely fun. Multiple exosuits with different AI personalities that you equip to fill the varying roles that the typical hero shooter has. Each level then has PvP or PvE finale where you're simultaneously competing against another team of players to finish your objectives first. Players invade the other team as giant, monstrous, special dinosaurs to wreak havoc and try to change the outcome of the match. Decent looking visuals for the title, and honestly at times an impressive number of enemy dinosaurs on the screen at once, up in the thousands, all being mowed down by you and your team. There are even time trial modes now with crossovers with Street Fighter and some other titles on the way. Capcom really didn't need to go as hard as it did with Exoprimal, but they did. It's 100% stupid and it's 100% satisfying and fun. Hopefully, this title will receive continued support into the future, as it is something I do want to go back to and continue playing. Following up Exoprimal in July was the phenomenal other weird title, Dark Souls with Guns, and I'm of course talking about Remnant 2. Gunfire Games followed up the first Remnant, which, although janky, was fun, with a 100% improved sequel, and up to this point, probably the best looking game released in the year. It was the first majorly released title to utilize Unreal Engine 5, and it looks all the better for it. The semi-procedurally generated campaign, providing no two players with the same experience, unless you're co-oping, a fantastic romp through different worlds with their different biomes and looks and enemies. Each world has its own story within which the player helped shape when they forged through to help, and then an overarching story dealing with humanity on Earth and every single different world. Each world has its various paths through it, offering different rewards for completing tasks in different manners. Even then, if you complete the same zone in all ways, more than likely you'll still need to go back into each world in its adventure mode to find every item and unlock every weapon or class. No two runs will be alike except for 2 worlds in the campaign, which is incredibly impressive. Gameplay is fun and tight. It's a third-person shooter as opposed to the typical melee gameplay of a Souls-like, though melee is a viable option, and I ended up with a melee bleed build. Boss encounters are incredible and diverse and an absolute blast to play through. These are some of the best designed bosses in any games I ever played. The classes you can play as are diverse in playstyles as well, ranging from a handler who has a dog companion to the melee-focused champion to some weird ones out there, such as the technician, where you can summon guns. Yes, you can summon guns. Everything about Remnant 2 reeks that Gunfire Games truly cares about the IP and went all in on this title. However, it was another title that had some issues on PC. Optimization seemed to be poor and relied heavily upon Nvidia's DLSS to run correctly. Fortunately, on my system at this point, I had a 4090 and 13900K, so I was able to brute force my way through the issues, so they were few and far between for me, but they still did exist for other players. Still, despite these issues, it was far, far, far from the worst PC release of the year at this point, because we had The Last of Us Part 1, Jedi Survivor, Wolong, Wild Hearts, all of which still suffer on PC as of writing this. Gunfire did tweak the game via patches, and as of the release of the first DLC, seemed to have solved all the issues with the PC port of the game. Despite these issues, Remnant 2 is deserving of a spot on my list, as it ate up a lot of my time. It continues to eat up a lot of my time because there's still a few weapons and items that I am chasing. Then, as the summer was winding down to a close and we entered the last month of it, August began. And what a lot of people consider the big one dropped. While it is certainly a title that is nothing but lightning in bottle, a level of cinematic polish unheard of for a CRPG, a niche genre, an incredibly niche genre, Baldurs Gate 3 launched on PC. And that's where I played. So, anybody else looking for another month, you can fuck off, you PlayStation users, or even Xbox users in December. Plenty of news of Baldur's Gate 3's upsetting some people because other developers said that this level of development is unobtainable and a standard affair, and I mean, honestly, let's be real, they are right, but not necessarily how Larian Studios didn't monetize literally everything. That you don't have to do. That's okay, and should carry over. Anyways, Baldur's Gate 3 is definitely the most cinematic CRPG ever released, and in a genre that is one of my favorites. While it wasn't my personal favorite game of the year, due to an unbelievable amount of bugs that many other developers would be lambasted for, I feel like Larian got a pass there, and a ton of bugs that actually just stopped my progression, I can't deny the fact that Act 1 of Baldur's Gate 3 was an 11 out of 10 experience. It is masterfully crafted, everything is voiced, there is such an amount of player freedom. However, as I've experienced with every Larian title, and the acts fall off more and more throughout the game. This is what happens when the first act is in early access for 4 years. The bugs rolled in, stopping my progression completely in multiple spots. However, despite this, like I said, thanks to that first act, Baldur's Gate 3 gets a spot on my list for 2023. With every character being fully voiced, great cinematics, secrets in the world throughout, immersive sim levels of completing encounters or objectives how you want to in the order you want, scratched a lot of itches for me. The production value alone of the game, beating out typical RPGs for a title in a very niche genre, giving this game a place in my heart. It's not the best CRPG I've ever played, but it's definitely the CRPG with the most production value, and you can tell Larian really cared about the title. And they used their care and every bit of funding they had to its full extent to release a title that will be talked about for generations to come. And then, returning once again to the smaller side of things, in August, we had Sea of Stars. And this is a little title that I've been looking forward to since its announcement. It's a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger. They even managed to pull the composer of Chrono Trigger over for it. Sea of Stars, I think, is overall the best looking game of 2023. I say this even though it's stylized. It's absolutely gorgeous. Characters have great design, particularly your main 3 party members. They're a diverse design, and they stand out so you know exactly who you're dealing with at any moment. However, the support casts you come across are also incredibly unique and fun. The world itself, and with even some tech thrown into it, as beautiful as you can get. The combat is refreshing for a turn-based title, giving you some agency by, pressing a button at the right time to get an extra attack in, to mitigate some damage by blocking, stuff like that. My Steam Deck is definitely an RPG unit at this point, and that's okay. Sabotage Studio did wonders with this title, and one of the titles from 2023 that I'll recommend to anyone who will listen. I love these kind of RPGs, and overall, it's just a highly enjoyable and memorable title. Everything in it, from the music to the sound design to the visual design, everything in it is fantastic, and it is a great world, and I really hope we do get some sort of sequel to it in the future from Sabotage. September rolled around, and I got my most anticipated of the year, game of the year, and I still stand by that anticipation. The first new IP from Bethesda in decades, and the first new game in half a decade. Starfield? Of course. While the creation engine struggled under it, Starfield was still a great title for a Bethesda game, and it worked, taking players to the settled systems in our same galaxy. There are issues with Starfield, but that's just mostly due to it being an aging engine. When I say it wasn't a buggy mess, I don't mean not a buggy mess for a Bethesda game. There were a few, but about what you'd expect from a vast, large, openish kind of world universe game. Majority of people absolutely love a game from this year that was in fact a buggy atrocity, one that received as many fixes as Cyberpunk 2077 had in its entire year after launch. And Starfield surprisingly wasn't that title. Sure, there can be a few loading screens, but honestly it makes up for such a little part of your gaming experience, not having to fly out of the atmosphere, not having to fly from planet to planet, to system. I am thankful for it. Those are literally the most tedious and worst parts of games like Elite Dangerous or No Man's Sky to me, or Star Citizen, and that's in fact why I can't get into Star Citizen. Starfield is the most in-depth and complex RPG Bethesda has released yet, all upon a NASA punk stylus. It's futuristic, but also grounded, even with some literal Bethesda space magic thrown in. Starship customization is phenomenal. Outposts can be created on planets. Factions have long and complex, varying stories on top of the main story, and thousands of mini quests and tasks you can come across in the vast space of the settled systems. Some of the random encounters you come across, such as a spaceship with an AI or a spacefaring grandma who offers you a meal, derelict starships with mini horror stories. This is a fantastic RPG. There's a ton to do. Now, they finally fixed some PC issues for me, like adding official DLSS support, which did increase the frames in it. Plus, we do have the creation kit on the way for official mod support later this year, as well as the first official expansion, Shattered Sky. The future is bright, and honestly, I don't see the hate for this game. It scratches a lot of those immersive sit itches for me. You can play through it stealthy, you can play through it loud, you can play through it melee. There's just a lot you can do. Starfield was my most anticipated title of 2023, and I don't think that it under-delivered for me. Rolling into October, we got it. We finally got it. A decade later, we got Alan Wake 2. Remedy Entertainment, whose prior game was their new IP, the phenomenal Control, returned to the world of Alan Wake. But with Control, they also revealed that was also the Alan Wake universe. Alan Wake was actually part of the Control universe, which is now part of the Remedy Connected universe. Alan Wake was part of this, and it's a great universe. Alan Wake 2 brought many major changes to the series. No longer does it follow just one protagonist, Alan Wake. We got two. No longer is it just a weird horror-themed action third-person shooter with back controls. It's now a full-blown survival horror title. It's not just an animated game with CGI cutscenes or comic panels. It's taking from Control, and it's blending gameplay, CGI, and live action. Not only is this a great change, but continuing how Remedy just wants to fuck with you. There's a full-blown rock opera section. Like, it is probably one of the best segments of a video game I've ever played through. Each protagonist, one being Saga Anderson, and the, of course, other being Alan Wake himself, plays through an interconnected yet separate campaign that you can switch back and forth from, or go through one all at once, in 2 different locations even. Then they converge. Twists and turns in the narrative. I can't really talk too much about Alan Wake 2 without gushing or without spoiling or droning on too long. Alan Wake 2 in my mind is just an absolute masterpiece. It exceeded every expectation I have. I can't recommend it enough, and it is my favorite game of 2023. It is my top game of 2023. Which is something I did not expect, actually. I figured it would have been Starfield or Remnant 2 or something like that, but it wasn't. It was Alan Wake 2. To top it off, one of the things I appreciate is that it's a full AAA title for only $50. And some of this is due to it being a digital-only title, and a lot of people hate on it that it's only digital, like they want their discs, etc. As a PC gamer, discs have been long gone for me. The digital age came much sooner. However, deciding to keep overhead lower and the cost down of the title, Remedy followed through with this. Remember back in the day when Sony and Microsoft once advertised that digital titles, those without a disc, would be sold for cheaper? Well, I do. Yet here we are, with Sony leading the way to a $70 price point, even for non-physical, digital-only versions. Remedy, however, made good on this promise. Not only is it a fantastic AAA experience, one of the most unique and best titles you will ever play, they kept the cost of a AAA title well below the $70 price point. Eat your soapbox, people. You're truly missing out on a masterpiece from a developer that actually cares about your wallet. Lastly, in the capstone month of the year, for December, we have Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, the expansion to, of course, Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I do have to include this title as it was a literal transformational release. Cyberpunk 2077 released in a mostly awful state to a lot of people, near unplayable for some. I didn't have any issues with it at its launch outside of a few minor bugs, but I could have been in the minority. Its original launch had systems that were RPG light, and mostly it was just an FPS with some RPG elements. Well, Cyberpunk 2077 dropped its 2.0 update alongside Phantom Liberty. Now it's a near entirely new game. This also came with visual updates, making it the best looking game out there. That's not, of course, stylized. Sea of Stars was a hyperbolic choice for me because of its style. Cyberpunk 2077 is just the most graphically impressive title out there right now, alongside, say, maybe Alan Wake 2. Ray tracing, ray pathing, reflections. If you have a computer that can run this game amped up, you're in for an absolute treat. Now, while I thought the Phantom Liberty expansion itself was okay, the 2.0 update overall transformed the title into what we thought we were getting to begin with. Phantom Liberty transformed the game as a whole, transformed the entirety of Night City. It's now an RPG that's also an FPS, brought about changes to how the open world functioned, brought car combat, even included a new ending or ending variations. However, this did mark the end of support for CP2077 as they move on to the next title in a new engine. Yes, it's just an expansion to an older title. Yes, it's just CD Projekt Red finally making good on their launch promises for the title, but it's such a transformation, and they did make good on the promise. The turnaround for the title is to the level of, say, Final Fantasy XIV or No Man's Sky, albeit with a decade less of new content, but revitalizing the game into something better, something greater. And discussing games in 2023 without mentioning Phantom Liberty and the 2.0 update for Cyberpunk 2077 just did not seem right, because I typically won't go back and play a game through the beginning to the end fully again, especially for an expansion like this. But there were such major changes, I did, and I enjoyed it all even more. Well, anyways, there you have it. You have my list of top games from 2023. Well, 13 games and 1 expansion. A few tiny ones were sprinkled in there as well, but it seems to be a pretty standard list, honestly, after thinking about it. Like I said in the section for Alan Wake 2, it is my game of the year. It is something that just completely came out of left field for me, something that I didn't think I would enjoy, but it really called back and pulled everything great from Control that they developed and that they did with the game, making it weird in their own, while also merging all the good parts of Alan Wake, specifically the horror motifs, while transforming it fully into a survival horror game with 2 protagonists and just a weird universe that was fantastic. Remedy Entertainment, bravo. You nailed it. I'm looking forward to the Lake House DLC as well as the DLC after that and whatever else you put out in the future. 2023 was a great year for games. There were definitely some stinkers in there as well. Like I mentioned before, just awful PC ports that should not have been released, such as The Last of Us Part 1, Jedi Survivor, some just really bad games such as Gollum, The Walking Dead Destinies, and King Kong. It was a great year for games overall, though, not necessarily the industry with a lot of layoffs, but unfortunately, I'm here to enjoy the games, and I don't want to, dwell on the negatives too much, as I want to enjoy life. I want to do what I enjoy. Anyways, thanks for sticking through. Thanks for watching. Hope your 2024 goes great, and I hope we have another great year of gaming ahead of us.